Good morning, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here every Thursday morning at 9:30, now at the Torch Center, studying a little bit about the week's Torah portion. And this week's Parsha is Mishpatim, and Mishpatim we know are the laws. We have many, many laws that are listed. It's just after the Jewish people received the Ten Commandments, the revelation of God at Mount Sinai, where God spoke not only to an individual Moses, but rather to the multitudes of Jews that were there. It was a national revelation, one that was never, ever seen like it before, and none that will be ever revealed to a group again in such a form. And then we have all the laws that follow. And it's very interesting that we look at the laws that we have. We have so many incredible rules and regulations and restrictions and things we have to do. It's really interesting as to why we have so many details in the Torah. So many details. Notwithstanding that, just before we get on that, before we move on from that point, it's just important to note that although we have so many details, the details are not fully elaborated on in the Torah. It means in the Torah we only have what to do, but not how to do. So all of the commandments that we have we're very limited with the amount of information that we're able to derive just from what the Torah tells us. We must have the oral Torah to explain all of those mitzvahs. Right? So it's not enough for the Torah to tell us to slaughter an animal before we eat it and what is kosher, but we have to know how to slaughter that the Torah doesn't tell us how to do. There are many laws that the Torah tells us to observe, but we don't know how to actually do it unless we open up the books of the oral Torah. Now, what was the oral Torah? That was the teachings that Moses taught to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai. It was in Mara, a location where the Jewish people camped at, that they received many mitzvahs. Later at Mount Sinai, and throughout the 40 years in the desert, the Jewish people kept on learning more and more till it was all concluded in the book known as the Torah, and the Jewish people were constantly learning. All the explanations, it's just like you go to class in university or high school or elementary school, and how many, you're teacher, right? Or Torch. How many hours of preparation go in your teacher, right? How many hours of preparation go into 1 hour's lesson? So here you could be studying for 30, 40, 50 hours for 1 hour lesson. You're giving all of that information in 60 minutes. So a student who leaves is not able to write 40 hours of information in 1 hour. So what they do is they say, they said the story, and they write out just the headline of the story. Story about shopkeeper. And then, just like, the idea is it's just the outline. And then later on they review it, and they're like, this was, it's just like, when you have just the headline, you're able to elaborate on all those details. The Torah is just the headlines. All of the elaboration of the details is in the oral Torah. It's very important. Okay, so our sages tell us a very interesting thing. The Midrash brings us down. Imagine there's a doctor making his rounds. The doctor's making his rounds. He sees someone who's so sick. He says to them, eat whatever you want. Eat whatever you want. Anything you want, you can eat, no problem. Goes a few patients later, doesn't listen. Puts down on a piece of paper, only these things you can eat. You can only eat these things. So the students who are going around in these rotations with the doctor, they're like, we don't understand. That guy was deathly ill, and you tell him eat whatever you want. This guy, you're telling him you can only eat these things. It doesn't make any sense. He says the guy who was deathly ill, it's not, it's just a matter of time. So it's insignificant. He eats more healthy or less healthy. It's not going to make much of a difference. It's all over. So, but this guy has a chance. So we want to give him every opportunity to live as long as he can. So the Midrash parallels that to the laws in the Torah. Where the Jewish people, we have so many laws, we have so many beautiful concepts and ideas that are there because God says, you know what, spiritually, you have a long journey ahead of you. There are other nations, they're not spiritually inclined, or it's not going to make a difference for them, that spirituality. They can eat whatever they want. It doesn't make a difference. They can eat. But for us, where we need to have that spiritual sensitivity, so for us, we have more restrictions. It's not, and by the way, it's not, from my perspective at least, I don't see it as restriction. It says, Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu lezakot et Yisrael. God wanted to give the Jewish people merits. Lefikach, therefore, Hirba lehem Torah u'mitzvot. He gave us many mitzvahs to observe. God could have given us 10. He could have given us 10 and goodbye, you're done. Instead we have 613 mitzvahs. That's a lot. So why so many? Because in every turn we have an opportunity. If we see a mitzvah as just being a law, commandment, you're right, it could be burdensome. But we don't see mitzvahs as a commandment. We see mitzvahs as an opportunity for relationship. We know that in any relationship, a healthy relationship between a husband and wife, so you want to have as many different connections. You go on vacation, so that's a new experience that you had together. You have, you go to a restaurant and you have an experience together. A relationship can be built of thousands of different experiences, and each one can be triggered. In your memory, it's like, oh, you remember we did this together. You remember we did that together. There's all of these relationships are, it's a combination of many different experiences. Our relationship with God is the same. Mezuzah is not just something we put on the door. A mezuzah is a constant reminder of the relationship and commitment we have with the Almighty. Every time we walk into our house, we put our hand on the mezuzah. Some have a custom of kissing it as well. It's a reminder Hashem is here, right here, in our home. He's watching over us, protecting us. When we light the Shabbos candles, right? It's not just, now we dedicated the Shabbos. No, it's that God is ruling over time. Everywhere, wherever we go. There's a set time for us to remember God is here Friday night with us. Right? God is with us all the time. But we have different mitzvahs to remind us. There's mitzvahs that remind us of God's control over our body. There are mitzvahs that remind us of God's control over time, over space, over matter, over every different element in this world. We have a way for us to remember God's existence and grow our relationship with the Almighty through it, through the observance of those mitzvahs. So, the commandment to eat kosher food, is not just a commandment, I'm going to have just a restriction for you. No. It's because we should be more spiritually sensitive. So this is one of the tools that God gives us to have that sensitivity develop and grow. And that is this week's Parsha of Mishpatim, of the laws. The laws go into the perfection of character, the perfection of a human being in growing to be the best possible person they can be in that relationship with God. So we're going to sign off from our friends online. Thank you so much for joining us. You're welcome to join us here live at the Torch Center every Thursday morning at 9:30. Have a terrific day, my friends. Thank you. And here's Rabbi Johnny.